Welcome back from that. Again, we call it a transition break, not a vendor break, and we do that deliberately. I'd like to welcome Colonel Curtis Hudson, U.S. Army, retired. Now he's the Principal Wargaming and Mission Systems Engineer at MITRE. A retired U.S. Army colonel with over 30 years of service. Colonel Hudson brings deep experience in executive-level military planning, operations, and strategic studies. At MITRE, he leads the mission-focused wargaming and systems engineering efforts supporting national defense. He previously served as the Command Inspector General at Troika and holds a master's in strategic studies from the U.S. Army of War College. Colonel Hudson will be leading a panel today on logistics wargaming and modeling simulation. Give it up for Curtis Hudson, my friend.
That was pretty good for after lunch and one panel down, so thank you for that. We will try to keep it moving. I will say to AMCL, thanks for having us today. This is my third year supporting the symposium, and it's always a good time. Today, we've got a very unique panel before you that is positioned to talk about logistics wargaming efforts across DoD. You'll get a good Marine Corps flavor and then a joint flavor on top of that as well. And we actually are going to sprinkle in some of that AI fairy dust just because everybody gets excited when you talk AI. I still haven't found what that means in any dictionary I own, but I'll get there. And with that, I want to go ahead and start here with my good friend Travis. We'll do brief introductions and then we'll go straight into the panel. I would ask, hold your questions till the end. We will have time for questions at the end. And if you can't understand what I'm saying, I will try to speak slower.
Hey, y'all. Travis Reese. Just the quick introduction side of the house. 21 years Marine Corps artillery officer, transitioned out in 2016. Been doing wargaming and joint planning since. So for the relevant portions of the resume for this, supported the Joint Force operating scenarios. So that thing which we did to create the Marine Corps operating concepts and test those for wargaming with my peer Leo, who will introduce himself. Also did the Enigma war game for the Marine Corps, which is the one that General Berger used to develop the specific Marine Corps information operations specialties. And then now supporting wargaming for both Systems Command and Marine Corps Logistics Command.
I'm really loud. Sorry, guys. Sandra Roshonda Thomas. I recently transitioned from the Joint Staff J4. Now I'm back in my reserve capacity. And so I've stood up my own LLC, Thomas Strategy Consulting. So while I was on Joint Staff, did a multitude of things working with OSD, putting together different war games. And I've written several articles as well, talking about critical minerals, wargaming, and then connecting industry with interagency and different government partners for that. So my LLC specifically is going to specialize in wargaming, and so I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me at all? All right, excellent. Test. My name is Dr. Maegan Nix. I work for Virginia Tech Applied Research Corporation. I liked what another panel member said. He's a recovering intelligence officer. That was earlier. I'm going to steal that. That's totally me. 14 years in the Navy and in DoD Intel. Then I spent another 14 at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. That's really where I started to get into war games. I did a lot more operational war games for special operations, for different COCOMs, for state and the interagency. And it's only recently, since I've been at VTARC, that I've started to do and transfer that wargaming background into logistics. And I do work closely with Travis on that. So you'll hear more about it and the AI fairy dust.
Hey, good afternoon. Colonel Dave Acosta. I'm an Army reservist. I command 2nd Brigade 91st Training Division, based out of Denver. Last 2 years I've spent with Compo 3 out at Fort Hunter Liggett doing combat support training exercises and observed how the Army does logistics. My background, I'm an information operations officer, and I've been doing that pretty much since I came in. I started off artillery. They put you in one no-fire area, and you got to find something to do pretty quick. But the light for me with wargaming came about 5 years ago, as I kind of saw quickly that I had a lot of scar tissue from doing the military decision-making process and going through co-development, and realized no, there's a whole different world out there in terms of wargaming. I did 2 years on the Joint Staff J7 Joint Warfighting Development as an Assistant Deputy Director, where I saw the transition, the creation of JWC Joint Warfighting Concept 3.0 from basically from signature from the chairman to implementation and doctrine, and then in the globally, and then I participated in the globally integrated war game 23. And so, to see all that and kind of see both, in the last couple of years, seen it from the strategic viewpoint down to the tactical implementation or the tactical execution for Compo 3 has been eye-opening. So
I should have gone before you. This is going to be way less impressive. Lieutenant Colonel Leo Spaeder, logistician and MAGTF planner by trade. Currently, I'm a Commandant's Fellow to the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. I just gave up command of 12th Littoral Logistics Battalion in Okinawa, Japan. I am here because, as Travis mentioned, I was a scenario writer for the Joint Force Operating Scenario, and then did the transitions to Wargaming Division while I was at Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. So I've been on the writer side in terms of exercise design or game design, on the sponsor side of what we're looking out for it, and then the lab rat side of an actual player participant. So looking forward to sharing with you today.
Excellent. Thank you, panel. And as you can see, we've got a good mix of practitioners and technicians as well. So we'll get a good flow of the art and science of experimentation. Travis, I'd like to start with you, as you've been conducting a series of experiments with different Marine Corps logisticians, organizations, and would like to get an overview of what you've been doing and then what you think you've been learning and where you're probably going next year with your campaign of experimentation.
Excellent. Yeah, no worries. All right, so I know that there's been some emphasis inside the Marine Corps on operational level logistics and strategic level logistics, and how much does the Marine Corps actually play in that particular arena, which is a great question. So this is perfect venue for wargaming. What could we find out about ourselves in terms of our operational and strategic level contributions, given that the Marine Corps typically has been focused on the shorter term amphibious operations, and then once movement ashore occurs, nesting within the larger joint enterprise, and with some of our larger logistics partners from the Army and from the naval side of the house too. So, and obviously this is going to dovetail with some things that Aaron Angel does from within his seat right now, and a few other areas. So hopefully this is enough of a preview to entice some questions. Last year, the Marine Corps probably did one of its first serious operational level logistics war games coming out of Solomon Express, which was tactical, and then went to Naval Service Game 24. So that was really focused on intra-theater lift issues and how we're going to effectively address the fact that we've got a subsequent series of transportation and distribution problems into the theaters of concern. With that, though, also at the same time, the Marine Corps Concept for Logistics is published. For those who haven't seen it, it's on the secret side, but really what it does is it says, hey, look, we've got concepts for logistics that outside of expeditionary advanced base operations, which really focuses on the tactical side, and the stand-in forces, we have two institutions that need to address how we connect the tactical seam and the strategic seam, and that puts Marine Corps Logistics Command and Marine Corps Systems Command kind of square in the middle of how we determine what their contributions are. So in the current opportunities that we've had as a company, both Troika and then within reputation as doing wargaming, we've been able to, one, support Marine Corps Systems Command this last year doing a prototype with them where we've been developing a way to employ wargaming and the data coming off of wargaming and then ingest that into modeling and simulation, which Meg's team's been supporting for us. And the thing we're addressing is the wartime acquisition sustainment support plans. So that thing which ASN RDNA, so Research Development and Acquisition, said that every systems command inside of the naval acquisition enterprise needs to understand about their supply chain risk and defense industrial base efficiency. So the issue is you can't model what the stressors are unless you have wargaming and simulation data that helps you understand what the demand is in order to communicate that to your industrial base and what their potential investments are going to be. So this is what we've been helping them shape, is an understanding of that armed conflict challenge and how to then promote that towards the industrial base. And more specifically, this deals with what happens after you've exhausted your primary table of equipment and your primary sustainment and then your war reserve, and now you're kicking up the arsenal of democracy. how do you project that? So earlier it was commented, war games that don't go beyond 60 days. Interestingly, we're trying to figure out what protraction looks like. And even then, we've got to capture what the first 60 days demand is, because it's going to be largely consuming. So unlike the Russians now, who are willing to give T-55s to their frontline troops, that's not the American way of war. So what are we planning? Marine Corps Logistics Command, General Reventlow has asked us, after we wrote a 5-year plan for him, to basically go through a wargaming experimentation and then an exercise process. So we're on the front end of that, doing the first war game. We'll initiate that starting on the 24th of August, but in earnest 8 to 12 September, and it will be the first operational level logistics war game. And we're employing the same tools we're employing for Systems Command, because shock, it's the same war game. It just has different answers. So they need to figure out how they're going to employ within the operating environment. Marine Corps Logistics Command by TO is required to provide a log-com forward, and it's in support of a component. And so we've got MAR4PAC now as the component in question, and it will basically combine, and we'll be down in Albany doing that game. We're using a platform called Battle Road Digital's Atom Engine to be able to run the war game. It is a fantastic platform. It will be, and they were just awarded a $40 million 3-year OTA with PEO Stry out of the Army to be the core for their next generation constructive simulation. So, back where Project Tripoli is looking as well back in the day. And then also we're going to be coupling it with a second experimentation process with the tool that we built with VTARC. And then, of course, trying to figure out exactly where does operational logistics nest within the Marine Corps contribution when every other service has an operational level logistics headquarters that contributes to their service unique logistics for Title 10 in support of their components. So we're going to try and map that out in this game. That was probably just enough of a teaser to be annoying, but hopefully informative. So that's where we stand right now.
Perfect. And then, Meg, I'd like to transition over to you. With your role as providing a lot of the AI tools, would really be interested in hearing how tools are integrated directly into the simulation, if you will, and then how you're using AI supporting the experiment as well. I think a lot of people have that question across the experimentation community.
Great, thank you. How many of you guys out there are familiar or have been part of war games? So, okay, so we've got a good number of people who kind of understand the basis of war games. Now, of course, there's lots of different flavors of war games. There's everything from you have tokens and dice, like a Risk board game. And then there are others where you may have a virtual platform that you're playing that has some sort of Monte Carlo simulation that's running in the background that can help make decisions as well in terms of outputs of particular battles or interfaces, right? So as Travis discussed, and when I think about putting war games together, I sort of think about it in terms of an assembly line, almost like you're using a mission engineering practice for saying, okay, what is my mission? And then you've got the design of the scenario and what level is it? Is it strategic, operational? It's like a checklist that you go through about how you would get from the front to the end, right? And so in terms of how you can use AI, imagine that you have, for example, ChatGPT, and you load every com plan and O plan into ChatGPT, as well as every international security studies textbook that talks about the relationships between different organizations. And then you say to ChatGPT, I won't use our Marine Corps. I'll keep my language nice. Okay, but you'll say, okay, I would like you to create a scenario for me that includes this organization, this country, and write me a scenario, right? So that's one way that you could use AI to automate the development of scenarios for wargaming. What we're doing, however, is a little bit more bespoke than that, in the sense that as Travis mentioned, we're using something called the Atom Engine from Battle Road. You could also use different simulators like AFSIM, or name your simulation of choice. We're pretty agnostic to it, and that is a physics-based model, right? So you're running your Monte Carlo simulations. You're saying these are the locations that I have for offset. This is the amount of ammunition I have. These are the different classes I have for logistics. And then you create a simulation where you think, okay, at this level of war, I'm going to be using this amount of X over this amount of time, right? And so all of that comes out in large data tables with locations, with the amount of the classes, with the different engagements that would happen kinetically. And then what we do is we take all of those tables and all of the outcomes of all of the different models that run, say, like 1,000 times, and we put them into, it's a little bit different than ChatGPT, but it's an LLM that's an agentic model. So we have different agents that can answer different types of questions about the outcome of all those simulations. So a human being doesn't need to go and look at all of them. Instead, you say, okay, what class of ammunition or what kind of ammunition is going to be dispersed first? What is the, and the Atom engine has red and blue, right? So say you were gonna model it for Indo-PACOM, right? So it's gonna tell you the kinds of capabilities that both sides have and what targets they're going after. So in that model, you could then create types of information like, when am I gonna run out of X? And if I run out of X and I expect that operations are going to increase to this level of type of kinetic engagement, when would I need to resupply? And then how long would it take me to resupply? And oh, by the way, if I filled it with the right amount of information, do I have this even in the DIB? Do I have this even in the organic industrial base? And it can begin to answer questions for you of what your resupply operations and op tempo need to be. So that's sort of the power of what AI can provide you within this in this framework and marrying up of physics-based models and simulations to how do I aid the decision maker so they don't have to read all of this, and in 5 minutes I can get a whole response plan. So we're talking about the WASPs or the warps, and so that this is what we're prototyping right now based on the work that we're doing with these war games.
Excellent. That a lesson learned as I've begun to experiment with AI. Prompt writing is probably a trainable task, right? I decided I would try clear the building. All the sprinklers turned on at work. That was not a good day. Sorry, that was really bad, but I enjoyed it. Over to Dave. What's unique with Dave is he's going to bring us our joint perspective, and he's going to bring us our multi-compo perspective. He's participated as an experimentation unit, and he's been in experimentation design. And as a sitting commander, I think he will probably also get into the challenges he faces integrating experimentation into his day-to-day task list.
Yeah, so, sitting up at the Joint Staff, at the sort of strategic level and seeing it, and Sandra chime in for, she was in the J4. It was really eye-opening. One, to see, I had no idea really what a concept was supposed to do or how it was supposed to be, but then to kind of learn the whole process and to see it go into doctrine. But then the experimentation side. We also ran what was called the Joint Experimentation Forum, where we're all, we're the J7, Joint Staff, OSD, allies and partners all come together and basically say, hey, you know what? This is our plan for experimentation for the next year. These are the areas we need you to go out there and do. It produces a joint experimentation guide. Now, I had never heard any of this stuff. I didn't know what, I was like, this is all news to me. But it's a really powerful tool because, I think it does play out for all of us, whether we're at exercises or we're at war games, in terms of what are we really trying to test here, and is it just another exercise, or is this a rotation? Because when I was out, we did a big Army Reserve exercise of about 10,000 soldiers this summer at Fort Hunter Liggett, California, and National Training Center, and the Port of Long Beach, all testing different logistics packages and pushing Class 1 and Class 3 into the box, which I didn't know, but Sandra was there receiving it at the time. And it was like, but are we just trying to do this, or what's the experimentation of this, and then how are we capturing it? And I think that's one problem I've seen is, we're in the Army Reserve, we're kind of learning old things new again, particularly when it comes to large scale combat operations. But I think, more importantly, we need to kind of be pushed, in the experimentation side to, hey, let's try some things and fail. The other part of it is bringing in Compo 3 for some of these big logistics war games. We tend to focus on the exercises because that's where the money, we make our money, but you got to bring these staffs in to be able to war game stuff so that they can fail. So we can practice failure, we can learn from it, and we can do it again and again and again. So I think, it's been fascinating. As a brigade commander, I came in and the first thing I did was I said, we've got to do wargaming. And everybody's like, well, we do MDMP. I said, no. So we need to try some different war games because it's going to help us train units to do this mission, to try different scenarios. And so that's, we've been working at, in a drill weekend, 2 days, we try to work some time in after hours to try, if you ever played Littoral Commander by Sebastian Bay, great game. It's easy, teaches a lot of concept of multi-domain operations. But it was just something that simple to say, hey, look at what we can do, and this is how you get after it. So I challenge the Marines out there, out in the fleet, bring wargaming in and kind of teach your people to play some of these games. Growing up, I was playing like simulations and stuff like that, and a little D&D here and there. But I never thought like, I'd actually be, I'd get to do this as part of my job. So I encourage you all to get after it. And then the other part of it is, looking at multinational components is, how are we bringing our allies and partners into this? Because that's critical. All too often, we just kind of press the I believe button, and we're like, oh yeah, that'll work for sure. And then you get out there, and it never works like that. But we've got to get there. One of the things about GIWG was we had the Five Eyes partners in the room, and we were all working together, and it was fascinating to see how well, New Zealand could do this with the Pacific Island nations, but don't let Australia do it because they'll mess it up. And they're like, oh, we're all one team, one fight. And they're like, no, it's different. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, I think it's really powerful to see. So you gotta take those things into account. So
cool. And then I'd like to transition over to Leo. He's in a very unique position. He had to transition his battalion, if I understood your bio correctly, and transition into one of these littoral logistics battalions. And as part of that, participated in a number of experiments and exercises. The Army is calling that transforming contact, right? I think it'll be interesting to hear what Leo learned and then maybe what he's going to carry forward from his fellowship, because, good work's always rewarded, and I think that's a sign of success. So we're very happy to have you here today, sir, and look forward to your comments.
Appreciate it, sir. It's funny you mentioned, Littoral Commander. There is a donut hole in Marine Corps wargaming where we have Travis and Dr. Nix, and you, sir, developing high-level operational logistics, global integrated war games. I understood about every third word about what you said with AI, and then, the systems Travis setting up. And then we have Littoral Commander at the bottom. There is nothing in that middle of how do you actually create either a war game, which hopefully is O-plan informed at the unclass level enough to get all your Marines involved, or to a simulation of how do we make something better with those skills of, hey, what is your problem, purpose, and objectives to design that, to make sure you're actually doing something of value that's replicable, that hopefully has some kind of results to refine, whether it's a new distributed logistics C2 concept, and break our battle U into 3 different sections with a main, so that if they kill one of us, they don't kill all of us, and we can keep the fight going, or use it as an educational tool at the same time of taking a single functional transportation battalion that never thought they'd leave Okinawa into a littoral logistics battalion that's going to fight in the Southwest Islands with a unit that there is no good data. What is an MLR? You all have the answer because there is no real answer yet because we're building it in flight. So that's kind of the big issue that first kind of gap that we have in what wargaming, modeling, and simulation are. What is a CPX? If you're doing it right, it's a simulation. Hey, are you a radio operator? Can I add tasks on you? What's their feedback? No, I can't. What's a new way to do it? The other big issue is from everything I've been hearing, keeping up with Travis over the years, is that we are building a wargaming structure for the next problem set. We've already captured the intellectual gap that was, there in 2016, 2017. Here's what we know the problems are. We need more ships. We need more munitions. I would like to know the exact type model series, but the answer right now is more, and it's not in the POM currently. So I think while we're trying to refine some items, we have an implementation problem. And I'm not sure if any more data is going to help, the commandant say, all right, I'm going to get rid of 2 infantry battalions and take that $30, $40 million and buy PGMs instead. And that's kind of the challenge we're at, where we still need to keep building this because we're going to have a problem set. We have some more discovery learning to do, especially on the industrial based side. But the things that we need to tackle the edge, we know, and are going to be late to need for many other bureaucratic regions, which maybe Pentagon Wars, the war game is something that we should come up with. DCINL wants to do this. DC Aviation says no, from what we heard earlier today.
Excellent. And I want to go back and cover a couple of comments that I think Sandra is going to be able to pick up very well with her experience. She's a logistician by trade. She served at the joint level and then inside the Army at multiple echelons. And she's also transitioning to a new field of endeavor. And she's going to be talking about an upcoming war game that she's participating in and helping stand up and run. So I think it'll give us a good perspective on that, how she sees safe to fail, and then that creating a tool that can be used more than once.
Thank you. As you said, I'm kind of going to pull a couple of things together as I've observed today and listened to multiple different panels. And so one key point, the Giovanni VP stated that while he was on joint staff and worked wargaming, that he didn't see a lot of collaboration with government and industry. And that's a lot of what I worked with and for the 2 years that I was on joint staff, really creating a connection between bringing in industry partners from NDTA, NDIA, and PSC, those associations and their industry partners that were underneath them with the services and the games that we were able to do. So one game of note that I still remember was the very first one that I participated in almost 3 years ago now. We had more NDTA participation with transportation, and it was a C2 game. And that game stands out to me the most because we had 8 participants, and just seeing throughout the day as it evolved, all of the different scenarios as they were all kind of talking and being integrated. And it was just the feedback at the end, like, hey, this is really great, but it was the but that came after. But had we been a part of the planning, we could have been able to do X. So as the years, progressed while I was on staff, I always tried to bring in industry earlier as we were doing planning for different games, because there's a skill set that industry has in being able to see things in a different perspective. And that may seem super simple, but that's not the first thing that you're thinking of when you're in the military. You're thinking, hey, I'm going to work through this, I'm going to get this done, whatever your COA development is, and then we're going to move on and we're going to do the game. But like I said, industry brings a different perspective. So if they're in their specific transportation, or if they're working on critical minerals, or if they're munitions experts, having that expertise is super helpful when you're developing the game. The next piece is I was thinking through as we were all talking at lunch together as this panel, it's like, why war game? Like, what's the point? And I think that sometimes we forget why we're actually doing it, and it really is for the war fighter, because they're going to be the ones that are actually going to be a part of the bullets flying. And I think if we remember that at the forefront of what we're doing versus at the back end of what we're doing, we'll think about things differently as we're planning things. David mentioned Mojave Falcon and NTC, and so I was a battalion commander on ground that serviced the 500 soldiers at NTC with 13 companies. And so I got permission from the Joint Staff to go and be a part of that mission and taking the company that I'm going to, the battalion I'm going to take here hopefully in the next couple of months. But it was very eye-opening to me as he talked about how staffs don't get a chance to practice, that having the opportunity to actually practice the wargaming portion of MDMP and doing it right really will serve staffs well going into the future, whether it's the Army Reserves or the National Guard or even just the active components. There was a lot of miscommunication that I think could really lend help even in using large language models and having those simulations and scenarios played over and over again, and then being able to look at the results. I think that's for the future.
Excellent. I think what we've heard so far, kind of a midstream recap, is that logistics wargaming is a joint effort. It's an interagency effort, and it involves industry. It also involves multiple components. That sounds hard, right? And of course, if it weren't hard, then the nation would not ask the Department of Defense to work on that particular challenge, I think, from personal experience, but different story. But set in that construct, any thoughts on how to get, and I've heard it said many ways, the most common way is how to get the right people to your experiment, and then how to integrate those people so that you maximize their unique skill set. I think what we all didn't talk about at lunch that came to mind was you go to a war game, there's 500 people, and you find out there's 469 observers. What's their contribution to the war game? And not bagging on observers, I've been one, but when you look at it and then you ask that question to the panel, who are the right people? How do you integrate them so that everyone contributes? Because national defense is hard enough without people wanting to watch the game instead of get in the game. Sometimes you got to get knocked down. It's a contact sport.
I'll take that one on.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned bringing industry in early. Bring your players in early, and then the nice way would be conduct informal coordination beforehand. The real way would be cut out the chain of command, go to the people that you need, especially in the fleet, the battalion commanders who have the authority, have some budget to put them together, and you get the right people. So we supported Solomon's Express, between 12th LLB and 3rd LLB to work on maritime connectors and that portion. And that was completely done through the informal network of going VFR direct right to Logistics Combat Element Integration Division, cutting out about 5 chains of command or echelons of command to get everyone to say yes, and then kind of fait accompli that portion, and also helping with the design and all that, all that in the front end to make sure supporting the Marine soldier up front. Your question's pretty close on your problem statement, but here's what makes it 100 rather than a 95% solution. So I think that's the big one is pre-coordination, informal, and then just kind of tell the bosses this is going to happen. And then there's always joint money to get because the Marine Corps is always broke. So Joint Staff J7 money to fly out from Okinawa, Japan with 12 Marines that know the problem, to include the only corporal in the Marine Corps that knows how to use the cocaine boat, briefing full bird colonels of here's what it does or it doesn't. So that's the biggest portion.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think too often it becomes, you get the room full of observers, but then what you don't have are the non-commissioned officers sitting in the room. It becomes all the officers. And, we've all got a particular way of looking at things. And my command sergeant major would hit me upside the head and be like, no, we need an NCO at the table talking about this stuff because they, see the world completely different. And so, really, the soldier Marine, first mentality is what we need in a lot of these war games. And I think it's crucial to say, oh yeah, because officers, we tend to hand wave it. The NCOs are like, no, sir, this could be, we can't do it. And then you're like, okay. So I think, it's a large part of it, yeah.
There's a practical way to finish that thought too, in terms of how we approach wargaming. So one of the things is that there's a big myth that you need cast of thousands of war games at a dedicated wargaming center to produce data that's important for the service to have generally. And that kind of needs to stop, and there's a couple of reasons why. One is we have enough wargaming tools now that we no longer require the intensity of effort that it took to build large wargaming centers to be able to have the tools available that you could only at one point in time get in an organization that had the dedicated money to develop the simulations, the stuff that we lived under when we were youngsters, going to MTWAS constantly, or for those of us, artillery side of the house who also did Janus, when we were going through as lieutenants, that architecture is not required anymore. There are enough companies right now that build cloud-based systems that are IL5 eligible to be on a CUI environment that you can do desktop wargaming from any location. And you can have a common data set and common data framework to do it from. And so the point is, if it's sponsored by the services and they are the ones who drive the data that goes onto that system for which they purchased the license, you now have common data, therefore you have common error, but you also have common outcomes too, that if you've got a problem and you need to adjust the simulation or the scenario, it's easy to define. The second thing about this is that too many organizations in the Marine Corps and the services generally believe that the desk and cubicle they go to does not have the ability to contribute to war games. And the fact is that the rest of the system is waiting for that piece of information that they have. So the services and the joint environment need to be able to find a way to allow these little small pocket war games that are happening, distributed and proliferated, to be able to bring that data back and go, all right, the war game that you conducted is useful, it conforms to our requirements, it meets our data standards, it was well structured and organized, it addresses the problem. It is now the service informing baseline for whatever problem or topic you're looking to pursue, which, I'm sure Sean will talk a little bit later too about, the nature of joint data itself and how we access and find these things. This stuff doesn't happen linearly. It is evolutionary, and it's the same way that there were 5 million monkeys in trees and only 3 made it to the ground. Eventually, we're in a situation where we're watching the evolution of ideas happening constantly all over the place, and you need to be able to distribute these games as long as you've got some common formats to work from, which even gets to the analysis side of the house. That thing which Megan's team is building right now in prototype will easily become available in a desktop format that anybody can manipulate over time. The buttonology will be super, super simple. So, to Leo's point, how does 12th LLB's discovery, accelerate, not decelerate, in terms of our institutional learning? And wargaming tools that are commonly available in both an IL5 and an IL6 environment, CUI and secret, cloud native, standard data formats, shareable, and then inspected by Wargaming Division or OAD or some other entity that says, yep, that's our answer, is how we proliferate this a little bit faster. So to Dave's point, who's involved, now you can have every NCO and officer. They're not going into a cloister. You don't need to have only observers. You can now have participants, and you can get your data out there.
The way I like to think about it is, in the acquisition field and the test and evaluation field, we talk about live, virtual, and constructive, right? So you can do things in a live audience with a live audience or live participants, in a constructive environment or a virtual environment. And wargaming should be using all three of them. And it doesn't have to all be the temporal aspect does not have to be aligned, right? It can be atemporal. You can have sidecar games. You can get what you need just through the design of the wargame itself. But I do like what Leo said, which is make sure that the folks that you really want, and both of you did, the folks that you really think are going to be critical to the human thought process are there, that their butts are there, whether or not they're there virtually at that desktop or in person. Yeah.
And I was just going to say, I know we were talking, I love hearing you talk because I think about it all being the evolution of like wargaming, right? And it's an ecosystem. And I think that, getting to a point where, industry will have more of the credentials to be a part of more secret games. Will be something that will happen. But a lot of the games that I was a part of, industry doesn't have all of the secret and TSI and SCI stuff to be able to go to those games. And so even the game that I've created, it's unclassified. And so the game is going to happen on the 27th of August. And feel free to come find me later today to talk to me about it. It's going to be focused on food and water because I think that's a missing piece that's happening right now. Like we're all focused on munitions. I've written about munitions. Can tell you stuff about it. I have my own personal thoughts about it and have written about it, like I said. But food and water is something that is not getting the focus that it needs. And so my war game is looking at that and what it looks like to bring that as a central focus and thinking through what a 60-day foreign denial of resupply will look like, and then what a grid being denied as well crisis looks like. And so when you think about those two parts, that doesn't have to be secret. Like we all can think of what that would look like. And so bringing industry, government, and interagency together to have that conversation. For some, you might be shaking your head like, hey, we've probably done that before. But have we? Have we really thought about what authorities need to be alerted? Have we thought about where FEMA, DHS actually interlock there? Have we thought about NORAD, NORTHCOM, and where they actually overlap, or do they overlap? up. And so I think it's going to be interesting. We have some AI folks that are going to help me out as well with some of their technologies. And so I think we're really going to get a good deliverable for it.
Cool. Before we transition to questions, I think just to recap some of the key points, start with Leo. Solve problems at your echelon was a different way to say what he said. You know, the chain of command thing can be sensitive to some. But the other part that he talked about too is build consensus at echelon. That, my experience, that speeds decision making as you go up. So those are great words of wisdom. And then I think Travis, Dave, Sandra, we're talking about tailoring your team, plan for an extended team, distributed over time, which I don't think, at least in my experience, a lot of organizations, when they come up with their campaign of experimentation, they have one or two really big money events. All their energy goes into those big ticket items. And then in the middle, you got all this dead air. Where's the data going? Where's the report going? What are we doing to integrate what we just learned? So continuous experimentation, maybe a way to attack that is distributed over time with those extended teams. Travis did a great job laying out the tools that are available to do that. And part of that's a comfort thing, right? When I get up in the morning, I want to see my formation of young, strapping lads and lasses, and we go do physical training, and those are my soldiers. I think we all acknowledge in the future of warfare and large-scale combat operation environment, that's probably a juicy target. How am I going to do that differently and still get that sense of satisfaction that these are all my strapping soldiers, right? And that's changing people's comfort zone, very difficult. And then I think the other thing that Meg hit on was it's the combination of tools. It's what I call the information age combined arms, right, in wargaming. I'm going to take war games models and simulations. There are no either or decisions in my mind if I'm trying to experiment to become better at whatever I'm doing or trying to solve that problem. So I think if you think about the high points of what the panel hit today, that would be my summary. And I'd like to turn it over to this absolutely beautiful audience for questions. Thank you. Sir, right here in the front. I don't know if we've got microphones or not.
That goes without saying.
Unfortunately, that's not going to be caught on video, but the rest of it. Excellent. I feel like something like this. This is incredibly encouraging. As a recovering Logie veteran of McWill, I always thought that experimentation, technology development, especially wargaming, as well as modeling in sim, which was in its infancy back then, as well as some of the technology we looked at, it just was, logistics was a hobby. And now, obviously, everybody says logistics is the pacing capability, and therefore it's important. But this is completely encouraging, especially because we've advanced the technology, Travis, like we used the Lighthouse for the log mod war game, to where today you made me seem like a dog watching television when you asked the question about the OV, which I think should be integrated into the overall construct of the wargaming you're doing at LogCom, Syscom, and then out to the fleet to see what LogCom forward looks like. Right. It is truly encouraging. I wonder if this architecture you have in your mind builds on each of these things. So you know that there's an industrial-based problem that might impact Class 5. And I agree, water and food are going to be the component we have to spend some time on. But it's like all these mini war games and modeling and sim need to be integrated, and then you're projecting out what LogCom and Syscom forward are going to look like. Hopefully they're not like professional bicyclists hitting each other. It doesn't hurt, just looks violent. And everybody's fighting about lifecycle management. But there's so many things that you can build into this and eventually come up with a solution to the ConOps that you delivered to General McWilliams. Surprised he didn't just get up and walk away. But it's so hard.
We're friends.
And now we're finally
Still.
realizing that logistics is important. I worry that we don't have the log C2. When you read INL 2030, or you read the follow-on campaign plan, or any of the force design stuff, now that we've said logistics is important, we're just not going to resource it, as Kurt found out last year from the former commandant, it still confuses me. the log C2 construct that we have, and we talk about a sustainment node and a supply node, it's BS. It is unsupportable with the current portfolio. And I know I'm one of those guys out there that's saying, I'm Spartacus AI. I'm Spartacus AI, because industry will come to the table and say, I have the solution. We don't have a log IT monetization, and I'm familiar with CDAO, construct and strategy, I think, to get there. And you don't need a war game to find that out, but I hope that's one of the components inside the war game to do the C2 that you talked about, and then plug it into what does LogCom Forward look like. But this, again, this is super encouraging. Thanks.
So a quick answer to a longer lead, but
You have a quick answer?
no worries.
I was going to make the same comment.
All right, so bottom line is that, you know, the way, so wargaming generally is a vehicle, and discover the data coming out of the war games, and of course you're trying to combine qualitative, people making decisions about things, and then quantitative, what's the information that comes out of it you can capture. Great. Intel drives maneuver, maneuver drives log. So you need the combat scenarios that inform the logisticians about what they need to do. And there's no restriction on the secondary uses from some of that data to do industrial base. So for example, Govini was up here and some of the other panelists earlier. There are things that they could do from the combat scenarios that Meg and I build and that type of information that would be information that would flow then to some of their industrial base analysis and tools. We fully expect it to be contiguous data for those unique questions, as long as you know where it is and you can find it and it's common and it started from some future hypothesis, what's going to happen in this future war, you can evolve it into all kinds of ancillary studies, and you don't need to be separated from the data and have it in silos.
Cool. Any last question? Sir, right here.
So actually, I'm an aviator who's infiltrated this conference. Kibbles and I are going to report back to the MCAA. Be careful. Yeah. Hey, so listen, it's more of a public service announcement from, I work with NATO, been out there for 12 years. The Joint Warfare Center has a general officer Marine type that is, there right now. I know Joe Garreau, you were also at the Joint Forces Training Center, Joint Warfare Center. General Ray Adams is there. We don't always have that position there. Before him was Mark Cunningham. Before him was another brigadier general. This is a unique nexus and opportunity because they are exercising the family of plans for NATO right now, which do involve U.S. forces, MAR4, and also Marine. So if you're interested in the contact information, please let me know, and I'll be happy to pass that on to you.
Great. Okay, we are at time. I have seen some quizzical looks out in the audience, and I think I'll answer this question. The pool, trying to figure out where my accent's from. It's true. I'm from South Boston. I wish you all the best, and have a great symposium. Thank you.